When life gets messy, and it will, how do we navigate the turbulent skies? I'm Jackie Almer. Learn more about Pilot Wife life, grab the checklist, and more at pilotwifepodcast.com. I know I promised a few weeks back to be here every Friday, and then guess what happened? Life fell apart. Today, I'm sharing some real life weather and some ideas for rerouting yourself when this happens, because it's going to. It doesn't matter your age. Life is ultimately going to come for you in one way or another. It's just a matter of time. We can navigate this with a few skills and a little bit of preparation. We all know that life is messy. We have kids, we have family, we have in laws, we have flight schedules, we have delayed flights, we have all the different things that go into pilot wife life for sure, but also just life in general. We have those well meaning friends, we have responsibilities, and more. We bear the weight of single momhood at different times in life. We often experience holidays alone, and very often comes down to making decisions on the fly without the partner of ours there and available to help us make those decisions. Then, when you toss in the range of emotions from guilt, resentment, feeling overwhelmed, angry, paranoia, other people's opinions, and guilt. Oh, wait, I said that already. Well, I'm repeating it because guilt is a big thing. This show is likely for all women everywhere, regardless of their marital status, whether they are married to a pilot or not. So it's posted on the Travel Life by a Pilot Wife YouTube channel and also the Pilot Wife podcast on all podcasting platforms. I do invite you to share this with other friends of yours, family members, anyone else that struggles with a messy life. And let's face it, that's a lot of different people. So again, it's not just for pilot wives, but as I near 4 decades of marriage and aviation being a very, very strong and steady part of my life the entire time, I get the tendency to compartmentalize. I've definitely developed that as a personality trait, and it's possible that you have too. And that leads us very often to bury stuff under the rug, to delay conversations, sometimes to completely forget about conversations. I know for me, sometimes something would happen, I would get mad, and then time would go on. He wasn't home. And by the time he got home, I just wasn't mad anymore. It didn't seem like a big deal. It didn't seem like something worthy of having a conversation. We can often repress or eat our feelings. Weight gain, anyone? Can I get a witness? So I'm sharing today a year in my life because you may see yourself in some of these challenges currently. It doesn't matter what your age is. Everything that I'm going to share here can come for you regardless of your age. And it's really interesting to me that I had this huge pile-on of challenges in one single year. I'm not the only person this has happened to, so it might happen for you too. Now, a little bit of my backstory for me, I always say I did all the quote right things. If you listen to the Trad Live podcast that I did a few weeks ago, I talked about that, right? I was the good wife, the good mom, the good daughter, the good sister, the good friend, the good business colleague, the good citizen. And for me, over the past few years, I was truly anticipating it being my turn to just be, to get out there and do all the things that I wanted to do, all the things that I had delayed or put aside because I was busy doing good things. Now, I'm the first to share, I wouldn't take any of that back. I love being a wife, I love being a mom, I love all of that. When you're choosing those different things, all of it involves a little bit of compromise. All of us compromise. It's not just me, it's not just you, it's not just wives or any of that. But often as you do that, or maybe I should just share my own story. For me, as I did that, as I delayed certain things, I kept thinking to myself, it's going to be my turn very soon. I'm going to get to live my life and go do the things that I wanted to do in the past, but that I delayed without having to ask for permission or without compromising different things, without having to struggle with childcare and all the different things, and certainly without inconveniencing anyone. Well, just as I was revving up for takeoff, the thundercloud cracked wide open and rained down on me. Now, it started in the last few years with my aging parents, and all of us are going to get there at some point, or I hope that you do. What I mean by that is, I hope that you have the opportunity, like I had of having your parents live a long, mostly healthy life. I know not everybody gets that. Some of you have already lost your parents. And let me just say, having lost both of mine within 10 months, my heart goes out to you. I am so grateful that I made it this far in life with both of my parents still married, living together, all of that type thing. I'm so grateful for that. And so I look back now on some of my friends who lost parents much earlier in life, and the empathy that I have for you is just incredible. You don't know what you don't know. But over the last few years, I found myself pitching in more with my aging parents. They needed help. They needed transportation. My dad, was still driving, but probably shouldn't have been for a number of years, taking my mom to doctor's appointments, taking himself to doctor's appointment. He struggled with some vision and eye issues over the years. And so there were a lot of times when he couldn't drive. And once my mom couldn't drive anymore, which has been, gosh, about a decade, he really was relying on either myself or my brother, Uber, or something like that to help get him around. And, since I relocated back to Arizona and live near them, I wanted to be the one to help him. But, along with that comes, again, compromising, changing schedules. And I'm not going to lie, and I'm going to share this as I go through. There were certainly times when I felt a degree of resentment for all of this being put upon me that I had to do. Now, I wasn't resentful to my dad or to my parents, just resentful to situations in general. Then, early last year, February 7th to be exact, our 29-year-old daughter was diagnosed with cancer. Seriously? I don't know about you. I never saw anything like that on my bingo card. In fact, I really lived in denial that it was going to come back as almost like a cruel joke, but certainly a misdiagnosis. I lived under that uh, fallacy for about 6 weeks. That's not supposed to happen to somebody 29. It's not supposed to happen to me. It's just, I'm sorry. I just almost refused to accept it. It was not a false diagnosis, and we have been working through that over the last year. That was February 7th. February 27th, after 5 years of negotiating, my brother and I finally managed to get my parents to agree, and we moved them into assisted living. Now, I will tell you, my dad resisted that forever. He did not want to be out of his home. He did not want somebody else taking care of him. He did not want to be a burden. He just did not want that. But the reality of it is, at his age, at that point, which was 92, he was struggling to care for my mom, who was 88. His own body was basically breaking down. And I've even told my brother recently that I almost feel like we're guilty of elder abuse for not really forcing them earlier to move. You can only do so much. He's an adult, he could refuse. And I certainly wasn't going to take him to court or anything like that, but I wish I would have tried harder. But, wishing and regret and all of that, those are just more wasted emotions. And so I'm not going to spend my time going there. But February 27th, we got him moved into assisted living. 2 weeks later, my dad fell, smashed his head open, had a pretty bad injury, ended up in the ER as a John Doe. Why, I'll never know that, but that was awful. My mom, as a diabetic, was there by herself. And because we didn't know a lot of things that were happening at the time, she really kind of went without good care overnight and some of that. Now, it's not that she wasn't capable of dealing with that, but I'll never know exactly what all went on with that. Finally got my dad found. We had to go digging for where he was and got him back home just in time to discover that my mom had gone into technically a diabetic coma, for lack of an official diagnosis. She ends up in the same ER that he had just come home from. Now, just quickly to backtrack, when my dad fell and hit his head, he ended up suffering an 80% vision loss in his left eye. And honestly, kind of mentally, he never recovered from that. He certainly never gained that vision back, but he never fully recovered from that. Now, back to my mom being in a diabetic coma, they ultimately got her to the point that they could move her to skilled nursing. She never fully recovered, never truly became herself. And she was a very non-compliant patient to begin with. I was pretty far north. I was, 40 miles north dealing with my daughter, who at that point had checked into the Mayo Clinic and was there for 32 days. So we were dealing with that, dealing with my parents, trying to navigate everything that goes on with that. And of course, as any parent would, I had to put my daughter's situation as number one priority. So I just had to let the medical staff do what they were going to do with my mom. All that to say, they were feeding her garbage. I'm not going to get super down that rabbit hole on this particular show, but I have a lot of opinions about good, healthy nutrition. And I will tell you that quote unquote protein shakes like Ensure and some of the things that they were feeding her, that the, number one ingredient is corn syrup. Okay, there's nothing nutritious about corn syrup, especially for a diabetic, but that's another conversation. The skilled nursing, all my phone calls, I couldn't really get them to honor my request to not give her some of those things. And so ultimately, she never recovered from that. And she ultimately passed away on April 25th. Well, one look at my dad told me my dad didn't even want to move into assisted living anyway. I could take one look at his frail little self and know without a doubt that he was not going to survive living alone in this assisted living facility. Bless his heart, my husband, who I will forever be so grateful for, had been telling me for quite a while he can move in with us. They can move in with us. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, I could not live with my mom, and I don't feel guilty about that. Some of you may have those situations with a parent where you feel that same thing. If push came to shove and they were going to be out on the street, I absolutely could have and would have. But given that they had resources, I just felt like it was better for everybody to put them into assisted living in that situation. And of course, they didn't want to be a burden on people, all of that. But I took one look at my dad and I knew absolutely I could not leave him there. So on May 1st, I moved my dad in with us. Now, my daughter checked into Mayo Clinic on May 20 or March 21st. So I forgot to say that. My dad fell and hit his head like March 14th. Then my mom went into a diabetic coma March 15th. My daughter checked into Mayo Clinic for 32 days on March 21st. This is what I mean by everything piling up all at once and repressed emotions, which I'll get into later, and some of the things that we deal with or don't deal with when we compartmentalize. So on May 1st, I moved my dad in with me. And it was so funny because he had some cardiology appointments and different things. So I didn't move him right away because I needed him to be down there closer. I say down there, I live in far north Scottsdale. He lived down in Chandler, more like far south Chandler. And so we were a good distance apart, as were his medical facilities. So it made more sense for him to stay there. My parents still owned their home, not as far away. I could stay there overnight myself, that type thing. But on April 30th, I said to him, or maybe actually it was earlier than that, on April 26th, the day after my mom had passed, I went to see him and just said, Dad, would you like to come and live with us? Would you like to come and live with Mark and I in Scottsdale? Oh, honey, I could never do that to you. I don't want to be a burden. I couldn't inconvenience you. Thank you, but I just couldn't do that. And I said, Dad, why? I mean, I said, I sincerely mean this. Mark sincerely means this. We wouldn't offer it if we didn't absolutely 100% mean it. We would really like you to do that. And he goes, well, I'll just have to think about it. And then, we kind of changed the subject. And of course, the news was blaring, as it always is. And I was sitting there. He got up to go to the bathroom and came back like 5 minutes later, and his whole demeanor had changed. And he was like, okay, I've decided. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll come live with you. And I was overjoyed, honestly. I was so glad that I wasn't going to have to fight with him and argue with him to get him to do that. So that made it super simple. He stayed down there by himself for a few more days while we got him packed up. And, I submitted his 30-day notice that he was moving out. Then I had to take him to all of his medical appointments and all of that. But he was fine. He was in good spirits. He knew that he was leaving. He wasn't staying there. He just wasn't going to have to be there. So we got him moved in basically May 1st. Now, I have a funny, not funny, almost sad photo here that I'm sharing, that at 92 years old, which is how old he was then, his life had come down to this in the back of my trunk. Now, he still owned a home and all of that kind of stuff. So it's not like he didn't have other assets, but really The reality of this photo is this is all he needed. His walker was in my back seat, but other than that, that's all he needed. His little small self didn't need more than that, which is kind of interesting. It's an interesting thing to think on as we live in a materialistic society, which I can tell you my father was never materialistic his entire life. So it's a good lesson for me. I'm going to do another show on lessons from my 93-year-old 3-year-old stoic father, what I've taken away from all of that because he was 93 when he ultimately passed away. So he moved in, and summer actually was good. We had a good summer. It took about a month, but was able to watch him slowly adapt and release the pressure, release the stress, release all the responsibility that he had lived with for all these years of caring for my mom. Now, it was good except for the fact that my daughter was still undergoing pretty radical cancer treatments. I was driving her not far from where he had lived, 45 miles for her cancer treatments. And, it took a lot. And it really did take a team environment between myself, my husband, my daughter, and my father. So I have my 92-year-old father at that point, my 30-year-old daughter at this point, she had had her birthday, both living under my roof. And I called it my boarding house. And it's like, you know what? We all just kind of pitched in and did what we had to do to navigate these new waters and what we were going through. And then ultimately in September, my daughter had to have stem cell transplant, which involved not quite a month, but about 3 weeks stay in the hospital. Through that, she broke her foot. It's a long story. I won't get into all of that. And then ultimately, she needed a 6-week rehab, which we ended up staying in my parents' home because it was closer to the Gilbert MD Anderson Banner Medical Center where she was undergoing treatment. So it was just an interesting time. And, in the time that my dad lived there, I watched him relax. I watched him really start eating better because I was feeding him extremely healthy. I watched him start walking around the pool, albeit on his walker, not too close so he wouldn't fall in, but he was enjoying sunshine. Like his whole demeanor was changing and he was starting to really enjoy life again. So in September, my daughter had her stem cell transplant. She was there for basically 3 weeks, and then we moved into my parents' home. And while we were in my parents' home, I had the opportunity, I'm going to use that word lightly, was also the responsibility, not entirely my responsibility, but I took on the challenge of sorting out and cleaning out my parents' overstuffed garage of literally 11 years of boxes that had never been fully unpacked from when we had moved them from New Mexico to Phoenix. That's a whole nother story. My mom had fallen and broken a hip 3 weeks after they moved into their house, and that changed everything. Like nothing was ever the same. All right, so we're down there and I'm going through all that. My dad is staying up in my Scottsdale home with my husband, and they're having the bachelor pad, sorting all that out. And then unfortunately, my father fell mid-October and I'm sorry, he didn't hit his head, but he fell and fractured his pelvis and his hips. He had 6 fractured bones and he was in so much pain. He ended up being thought he was okay that night. My husband got him tucked into bed. He seemed okay. The next morning, he couldn't get up. He was in pain, called 911. They came, they took him to the hospital, and he stayed there for a little over a week. And then, of course, moved into a skilled nursing facility to recover. And he had a very rough recovery. He was in a lot of pain. And I honestly thought I was going to lose my dad at that point. But as I was visiting him, my husband was visiting him, and we were really working on him to help get him back up to speed. I had started having my husband bring in healthier meal options for him because, again, they had him on basically, liquid diabetes, as I call it, Ensure and pancakes with fake sugar syrup and all these things that were in no way healthy and were in no way helping him to heal. Now, at this point, my dad is only on a very low dose blood pressure medication. I'm happy to say my dad never had to have a lot of medications because he was healthy his whole life. He took care of himself. He was a stoic Texas farm boy. He got out in nature. He, lived on good, healthy, home cooked meals. He grew up on that. He really had an amazing start. And it wasn't until the last decade when they were living on their own, my dad was tired and exhausted, that their meals really started paying the price of ultra processed foods and a lot of that kind of stuff. But I had already taken that on. I had gotten rid of all of that. I had weaned him off the sweets and some of the stuff that he had taken on and was feeding him extremely well. So ultimately, he decided to recover. He decided he wanted to come home. I kept saying, Dad, I just want to get you home. Your birthday's coming up. Do you think you can get recovered and be home in time for your birthday? He didn't quite make that. So we celebrated his birthday there, but we celebrated it with the knowledge that within the next 4 days, he was going to get checked out and he was going to come home. I kept telling him, I want you home for Christmas. By the time you get home, we're going to have started decorating. It's going to be a beautiful Christmas, blah, blah, blah. And he was looking forward to that. He really rallied and was excited. He definitely began to have a steady decline after that. We had a lovely Christmas. We had some good days. We had a few bad days, but he also began to lose more of his vision. And I won't get into all the particulars, I'll save that for another show. But ultimately, as he realized his vision was declining even further in his right eye and wasn't going to be recovered, I really truly feel like he chose to give up. He chose to give up. So on February 20th, he passed away peacefully in my home, which was a fear of mine. After I moved him in, I had this huge fear that he was going to die in my home and that I wasn't going to feel okay with like that, like it was going to haunt me, or that he was going to have a really struggling, awful death. And that was going to be my last memory of him. I wouldn't have wanted him to go anywhere else. He passed away peacefully, surrounded by those who loved him, not in an institution like a hospital, people going in and out and, beeping sounds. It was very peaceful. It was calm. We had brought in a hospital bed for him at that point, but he couldn't have gone out in any better way. I wish I could have had him longer. I really, truly do. Like so many people, there was such a list of questions that I wish I would have still asked. My brother and I talked about that a lot. Um, and after he passed, even though I was ready for it, like I knew it was coming. I think we had 8 or 9 days that he quit eating, quit basically drinking. He never got out of bed again for 8 or 9 days. And ultimately, I had time to process the fact that he was leaving, that he wasn't coming back, so to speak. And so I thought I had made peace with that and was ready. But after he passed, it hit me so hard. I had such grief. It was crazy, surprising. Because I had him so long, he wasn't sick when he passed. I'm certainly happy. He just really gave up. So I had a really big struggle for about 4 or 5 days. And then ultimately, I finally found peace. And part of that was just doing a lot of journaling, a lot of intuitive writing where I would ask him questions, honestly, in my journal. And then I would just quiet my mind and see what came back for me. And I don't know if it was just me making stuff up. If he was speaking to me from the other side, that's what I'd like to believe. And as much as anything, I'd like to believe that the 6 decades or seven, whatever, however long I was with him as his daughter, that I did get to know enough about him that I knew him better than I thought. And what I really came to terms with was what we gave each other for 10 months. For me, I gave my dad a soft place to land. I gave him the not having to have any responsibility after years of my mom's care. And one thing my husband always said was, man, your dad is setting the standard for all of us in the way that he cares for your mom, the way that he hasn't shunned any of his responsibility. He's taken all of it on, and it's amazing. And I will say that my husband has, certainly with the care of my father, he modeled that extremely well. But I was able to give him a soft place to land, watch the stress and strain and relief come over him. I was able to give him love and community and sunshine. We bought him a special chair out by the pool that reclined and was comfortable for him. And he loved going out in the mornings and having his coffee and dozing off in the sun and listening to the birds and watching the birds and the hummingbirds. And, I live not far from the Scottsdale Air Park, so we have beautiful airplanes fun airplanes, antique airplanes, small planes, military planes. We have all different types, and then sleek jets, of course, too. And then, of course, we have the Sky Harbor traffic. But we loved sitting out there together and commenting on the airplanes in the mornings. I gave him great nutrition. I fed him so well. Sometimes we fought over it a little bit because I'm like, no, Dad, that's too much sugar. You can have a little bit, but not all of that. So I had to be militant at times, but I will say I don't regret that because he did thrive ultimately. His color was great, his attitude was robust, and I know that the good nutrition truly helped him. He started walking on his walker around the pool, like I mentioned, so he was getting movement. He was surrounded by community. I have a neighbor that, he made friends with that was just slightly younger than him. And he had a beautiful last Christmas. My parents had quit celebrating Christmas in terms of like decorating. I decorated a few times and then I realized that it really didn't matter to them. But I was able to decorate his bedroom, my entire house, and really send him off at Christmas time with just that feeling of peace and beauty and hope and joy in the world of what Christmas is all about. I That's it for me, the lights, the feeling, the hope, all of that. So he did get that. He got his last bit of eggnog, which was something he really wanted. That's a funny another story. But I was able to give him the gift of a really nice, peaceful last 10 months. What he gave me was he truly did relieve some of the guilt that I had built up over decades of feeling like I didn't visit them enough. Yes, I had airline benefits and I could have visited more. We all get caught up in our own lives. I had children that were involved in activities. I couldn't just be there all the time. They lived in the Four Corners in New Mexico. I grew up in Durango, Colorado. They lived closer to Farmington, but between the Farmington airport and the Durango airport, it's not an easy place to get in and out of. At that point, I was living in California for a lot of it. It wasn't super convenient to drive. It was a long drive. I mean, just a lot. And I realized, well, I'm going to talk about the guilt in a minute, but I had built up so much guilt over my parents. And I relieved some of that guilt by moving him in with me and being able to give him that last 10 months of peace. I thought it was going to be longer than 10 months. It wasn't. And that's okay. Um, he also gave us the gift of a team effort. I mentioned we had my 90, he turned 93 in November. We had him, we had my 30-year-old daughter. So we had an aging parent, we had a daughter undergoing a cancer journey, cancer therapy, days of nausea and illness and a broken foot and a stem cell transplant, just all of these things that where I felt like, for me personally, I felt like I relieved the pressure cooker for him and I took on the pressure cooker for myself. But that's just part of what parenting and all of life delivers to us sometimes. So it was a team effort. I through it, he helped me see my husband in a different light. Because my husband was amazing, how he pitched in with not only my dad, my daughter, all of it. Every morning, get my dad's coffee. My dad had to have a catheter for a while. My husband was just like a boss, would drain that catheter, never complain, never any of that. He just took on and did what had to be done. And you know what? Nobody really, quote, signs up for that. We're not medical people. I get the heebie-jeebies. I don't even give blood well, to be honest. I don't give blood well. It used to be a joke that they would always find a Snoopy Band-Aid for me because I was such a whiner. So to take on some of this medical stuff over the last year, I mean, there were times I wanted to throw up, I wanted to faint, I wanted to do all that stuff. And, you buckle down and do what you have to do. And that's what we did. We became a team effort. But then ultimately, I had to find peace. And that's what I did because I really had to reflect back on why his death hit me so hard. And I realized that the biggest thing was I was feeling guilty. I mentioned that guilt of not visiting them enough, guilt over not asking enough questions like, Dad, what interests you? Like, I was thinking back. I don't know my dad's favorite color. I never asked him. I don't know this about my dad. I don't know that about my dad. When I went to work for the airlines and told them he had airline benefits, he was so excited. He wanted to go to Germany. And my mom hated to fly. So she squashed that early on. My dad could have still gone. And I told my dad I would take him to Germany. And I never did. So I had guilt about that. I'm letting all of that go. I had guilt over not going down there and cleaning out and unpacking all their stuff and helping enough with meals. I live 40 miles away. Like he wasn't right next door. Even though I live in the Phoenix area, he was in Scott and Chandler or Phoenix South, and I was in far north Scottsdale, am in far north Scottsdale, and it wasn't super convenient. And I had to let go of the guilt of all the shoulds that I put on myself. I said everything I needed to say before he passed. I let him know how valuable he was to me, how my entire life I have shared with people that I knew I could be anywhere in the world stranded. I could call my dad collect and he would take my call. That was back when we called collect. I'm dating myself. Some of you won't even know what I mean, but most of you will. I could call and collect. He would take my call. I could tell him to prepay an airline ticket for me. He'd do it. He would wire me thousands of dollars, no questions asked. Now, I never had to call that card in, but my entire life, I knew that I had that card in my back pocket to play anytime I wanted. I told him that. I told him what that meant to me to have that security. I'm going to get choked up. And then my brother and I talked about it, and my brother agreed that he had my brother's back. There were a couple of times that he did have to call in that card and needed help through no fault of his own, but through, job layoffs and things that you can't really anticipate, especially when he was young and a young parent with a new baby and a lot of different things like that. So we really were able to share together what our dad really meant to us and all the things that he did for us. And I realize I'm one of the lucky ones. Not everybody has that experience of a parent. And I know not everybody has that experience, certainly with their father. But I had one of the good ones. And I married one of the good ones. And I raised my son to be one of the good ones. And I know that he is. My brother is one of the good ones. And it's my experience that his two daughters are married to two of the good ones. So I know that we subtly role model for our children what to expect from others. And my dad did a great job of being that solid role model for all of us. And it's interesting. I've been adamant for the last few years about not wanting to sell his house, that my brother and I could ultimately keep it, and we're going to. It's paid off. It's a great investment property. But if my brother didn't want to keep it, that I wanted to buy him out. I wanted that house. And it was so funny because after he passed, I kept thinking, what is it about that house that I wanted so badly? I had issues with that house when they moved into it. That's a whole nother story. I won't bog you down with all of that, but I hated that house and I had to make peace with that house. And ultimately, that house became a nice respite for my daughter and I, a soft place for us to land when she needed to be closer to her clinic following stem cell transplant. And what came to me with all of that is that it still allows me to always be able to go home. That's what I always knew all of my life with my dad. I could always go home. No matter what was going on in my life, I could always go home. There were times that I went down there and spent the night with them, and I just would go home. I never lived in that home, so it's not like that, but it was his home. And he always provided that to me as a safe space. So it was that safety net with my daughter, and it's that safety net that I know that I have that I will likely never have to call in, but I can always go home. And that's the deal with the house. So, like I said, finding peace is so important. I feel like when I sit out in his pool chair, which I've done a lot over the last week, it's like he's talking in my head. I took him on like a project, wanting to make up for everything that I felt guilty about, everything that I felt that he had struggled with my mom, all of that. He was never my job. He didn't want to be a burden on anyone. That's what he said to me when I first invited him to come live with me. And he never wanted me to take him on as a project. He never wanted me to shoulder all of the guilt and the tasks that I was bringing on myself. And I feel like he was talking in my head when he said, you wouldn't want to do that to your kids. I don't want to do that to you. I never wanted to do that to you. So it's interesting. He's come to me in several forms. Maybe I'm crazy, but I believe it's him. In meditation, he's come to me almost, well, not almost, but as a purple amethyst kind of crystal with a ruby red heart beating in the center of it. He's come to me as an eagle in my meditation. And then yesterday, I had asked him to come back to me as a roadrunner. And I picked a roadrunner for a very specific reason. First of all, roadrunners are prevalent in Arizona and Texas, but they're uncommon. Like you don't see them all the time. They're more elusive. It was one of my favorite cartoons as a kid, and he's one of my greatest memories of being a kid because he was always there. So I asked him to come back to me as a roadrunner. Now, this is no mystery. My husband knew it, my daughter knew it. I had told several other friends that that's what I asked him to do. Um, and yesterday he did. And here is the image and the video that I took when I was called to walk outside yesterday evening. I walked out, I looked up in the sky, and the moon had come up early, like around 5:30. You could see it bright and bold. It wasn't a full moon, but it's getting fuller. Um, and the airplanes, the departure lane, if you will, from Sky Harbor was obviously routed that way. All of the airplanes looked like they were taking off over the moon, like they were flying up over the moon. And it was just a really cool thing. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I wish my dad were seeing this because he loved the airplanes and he would have gotten a kick out of all these airplanes with the visual that they're flying over the moon. And about that time, I heard an interesting bird sound. I ducked down and I looked, and there was the Roadrunner sitting on the wall. I've never seen a Roadrunner from my backyard before. I've seen them occasionally, maybe two to three a year, walking around near the entrance to my gated community. I've seen them, so I knew they were here. But because they're so elusive, I asked him to come to me with that, and he did. Believe what you want. It's okay. I'm not here to change anybody's mind. I'm just here to tell you that I got so much great peace from that and believing that that's him. So I'm taking the memory of him everywhere. He's reminding me to go, do, and be and live my life. Travel to all the fabulous places that I want to go to and all the places that he never did. And again, I can take that memory of him with me everywhere I go. And there are so many great memories to take. So I want to wrap up by saying that guilt is a dangerous, wasted emotion. And sadly, we take so much of that on. It plays with one's head. It can create illness in the body through repression if a person isn't careful. I know because been experiencing that, but I'm releasing it now. And it's mostly created in our own thoughts. And as I've unpacked my decades of guilt around my parents, I realized that no one ever put that guilt on me except me. So my goal now is to heal that, to model for others, maybe even you, how useless that is, to make sure my own children don't take this on. So what about you? Do you struggle with guilt? Do you struggle with other repressed emotions? Do you want to chat about it? You can schedule a free call. You can also grab the Pilot Wife checklist, and let's just have a simple conversation about life, emotions, and guilt. Go to pilotwifepodcast.com. If you're listening to this in your earbuds, please rate and review the show in your podcast app. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, drop me a comment, and share what you're experiencing. So I will see you on the next show as we continue the adventure and the conversation. Thanks for listening. Hey, pilot wife and fellow aviator, I'm Jackie Almer. With nearly 4 decades as a pilot wife, I'm here to help you navigate the ups and downs and turbulence that can go along with this lifestyle. To learn more about the resources and coaching I offer, go to pilotwifepodcast.com and make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, Travel Life by a Pilot Wife.